Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion. And guess what we're talking about? Living life on your terms. And I've got Sabine and Birgitta here. And we were just saying before, I think that we've all made the bold move and we're a great trio to be having this conversation. So, Sabine, what do you reckon?
Oh, look, I think it's a good idea. It's an interesting question, an interesting statement, living life on your terms, because the other thing that we were just talking about was, do you ever get there? And I think that's a big question as well. For me, I feel like I'm always evolving. And do I ever get there? I don't know. But for me, that brings in a lot of other questions like, am I being a perfectionist when I say I'm always evolving? Or do I need to just sit in my space and go, yes, I've made some bold moves in the past. I've made some big decisions. I'm evolving. That's great. And yes, I'm living life on my terms right now and every other day into the future. So maybe that's what it means to me. Live life now and every day into the future. It's an interesting question.
It is. And I also want to unpack the bold moves that we've all made. But Birgitta, what's your take when you hear living life on your terms?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, and like Sabine, you can always say, well, do we ever get there? I think it's also I think we never really get there because what does it mean? It's that question. What does it mean? What does it mean for us? And it changes over time. So I mean, you might at one moment have the feeling, yes, I'm there, and then something unexpected happens, and all of a sudden you feel that you're not doing it anymore, or that there's still that little step to take. So I agree with Sabine that it's always evolving and that it is a nice idea and a nice aspect of living life on your terms to take life as it is at present and fully embrace that.
So, Birgitta, when you say, do we ever get there? What are you doing at the moment to live life on your terms?
Well, I think for me, living life on my terms means that that I can make choices. So being my own boss means that, yes, on the one hand, I work very hard, but if I don't want to work, I can make the choice not to. Or I can make the choice to go out and have a drink with a friend, or I can make a choice to do like 10 meetings in a row. I mean, I just set the agenda for my day, for my week, for my life, for everything.
Do you feel guilty?
Sorry?
I know I sometimes feel guilty when I'm not actually doing work, because, we've got this mindset that we have to work. And sometimes I don't get the income that I want to get, that I've set myself because I've made the choice to do other things. And then I feel guilty. Like, do you guys feel guilty?
Yes, I do. I often feel guilty. That's why Birgitta is great, because Birgitta she's amazingly unguilt. She's amazingly non-guilt. I still feel guilty because I think working.
Yeah. Well, I'm always I have this mindset where I'm like, okay, yeah, we can chase and chase and chase and chase and try to get as much as we want. When we're doing that, we sometimes forget to live. And I think it's important to live because life is so short. We never know what's around the corner. And just chasing all these things that we never know whether we get them. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't chase them. I'm just saying that we probably should be a little bit more compassionate with ourselves and say, okay, maybe this was not a good day to chase it. Tomorrow is a better day. So we always have the intention to do it, but don't feel guilty when it falls apart. I mean, there's so many things that throw curveballs in whatever your plans are. And I think I've always tried to accept the fact that that's the case and to look forward instead of getting stuck in that.
I like it. I'm part of this accountability group, or I'm part of this business coaching group, right? And this is for my coach. And one of the things that we all have to do is get into this group and do a couple of lives every week and talk about our wins. And I said to my coach on Monday, I haven't been in the group because I don't feel like my wins have been big enough. And she's just gone, well, let's just talk about your wins. What are your wins? And so we talked about it, and she goes, well, you might think they're not big enough, but other people have a different opinion. And she goes, but the other thing is, go into the group and say, you don't feel like you've had any wins this week. And it's almost like that's a win. You know, like it's the perspective as well.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting thing. And she said, when someone hears that someone else hasn't had a win, then it's okay to go in there and say, actually, I haven't had a win. But then you start a conversation and go, well, you know, really? What have you been doing? And then you have a conversation and then you go, oh, yep, you've had a few wins. Yeah, it's interesting.
That's right. And maybe you've won somewhere else. Maybe you've won because you've let go. See, because that's what I find for myself is that it's like sometimes I just have to accept and roll with what's going on rather than, getting all stressed about things that I, had set myself to achieve that I just haven't achieved because I haven't had those blocks of focused time just because of my circumstances. And like at the moment, I'm in Perth, working on a working holiday because my daughter's just had a baby, as you all know. And there is just, I'm juggling. And even today, I just had to say to myself, look, it's totally fine. This is living life on my terms. I'm here doing my work, bringing my work with me, traveling and, enjoying my new granddaughter and supporting my daughter. And that's a huge win. But I'm maybe not winning in every other thing on my productive list that I absolutely must, tell myself that I must get done. So,
well, one of the most powerful ideas I came across some years back was to stop focusing on your to-do list, but make a ta-da list, which is actually just listing everything you've done on a day, and then you'll be amazed. And you have a lot of wins, even if it's not maybe the things that you set out to do. Because there's so many things where we are, and especially as women, I think we're juggling all the time because we've got families, we've got partners, we've got work, we've got all kind of other things that we need to do. But we sometimes do not give ourselves credit for the fact that we're doing all those things, and then we feel as if we haven't achieved. And by the way, what you said or what your coach said, I think that was very powerful as well, Sabine, because going in and saying, hey, listen, I had one of these days where nothing came out of my hands, or one of these weeks where there was not a big win. It's not about the big wins, because the small wins in the end will bring us further and let us make progress. So that's really powerful as well. I like it. It's really nice.
Well, I like your idea of the ta-da list. Ta-da!
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes you feel happy because you've done all these things.
It absolutely does. Yeah. It makes you smile as soon as you go, ta-da, it's done.
Yeah. Ta-da done, ta-da done.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
one thing I used to do was a to-don't list. And that was write out all the things at the beginning of the day of things not to do. And that's an interesting perspective as well, because then you go, don't be sidetracked. And then that would lead on to your to-do list. Quite like that idea.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, I wanted to say one of the things that is very high in my values is to be available and to care. So if things come my way where somebody asks for my attention without giving up too much of myself, I want to be there, and I want to be there in that moment and not really like be so focused on all the other things that in the end are maybe not as important as that one conversation that you might have. So that's also, I think, living life on your terms and being there and being present.
Hey, so I have a question for you then.
Yeah.
Do you believe, both of you, do you believe that we have a path laid out for us, to the point where whatever we've done today or this week is what was meant to happen? I think about this a lot. Be interested to know what you think.
Well, I think that if something did or didn't happen, there's a real acceptance piece required. because if it didn't happen and we wanted it to, then it is what it is and we can't go back and change the past. But I think that we certainly have, some, or for me, I've got these projects, She Simply Impacts is one of them. And so it's like just course correcting. Okay, so is this still important to me? Is this still a burning priority that I really still care about? And if it is, then it's course correcting. So yes, it was meant to happen because that's what happened, but I still don't want to give away all my kind of power, I guess, and say, oh, well, because every week could happen or not happen depending on what I choose and what actions I put behind that choice. So I don't know, does that make sense?
It does, because I suppose you can, there's like when you look back, right, let's say you look back at the last year or the last 5 years and you think about the path and it was completely unexpected, but you're where you're meant to be right now. And then you go, there were some detours there along the way. And obviously those detours were meant to happen because you learned valuable lessons, on those detours. So yeah, I think that I'm a huge believer that, and it may not come down to the day or the hour or the minute, but I'm a huge believer that we have a path laid out for us, and wherever we're going is where we're meant to be going, even though it may not right now seem that, we're getting anywhere. But like you said, Ange, there's a level of acceptance in there. And when you accept that where you are right now, it's almost like this weight gets lifted off your shoulders and you go, that's okay. That's okay. Whatever's just happened, that's okay. I'm meant to be here. What's the lesson? Let's go on and let's see what happens next. It's quite interesting.
Choose again, because Birgitta said at the very beginning, living life on your terms is about having choice.
Yeah.
So it's about the re-choosing or not, because whatever you learnt along that path has, changed you and impacted you, and maybe you're going to choose something else because of that detour.
Yeah,
it's a cool thought.
Well, yeah, and if I can say something about that, because for me it's like two things. Because I've always had that mindset of, I'm always open for the things that come on my path, and then I have a choice to do or not to do. I very often jump in, so I do, but I have a choice. I can say yes or I can say no. And I've said no to things where maybe at the end I was like, oh, maybe I should have said yes, but not that often. But anyway, so yes, to a certain degree, I do agree with, or actually to a large degree, I think I do agree with the fact that things that come on our path are meant to be coming on our path. On the other hand, I do believe that when we manifest things in one way or another, whether we put an intention on it or whether we want it really, really with our heart's desire, they tend to come on our path. So the question that we can then ask ourselves is it meant to be, or are we subconsciously steering ourselves in a certain direction?
Well, if we're subconsciously steering ourselves in a certain direction, is that not the path we're meant to be taking then? Just, putting it out there.
Yeah, you can say so, but sometimes it's an idea that you put in, then you forget about it, but it's still there, so it's subconscious in that sense. So you did think about it. Like, for instance, to give you an example, when we were in living in Australia in the first place, in Byron Bay, at a certain point, I wanted to go and move somewhere else. I wanted to move to Brisbane. It was not concrete. It was not something that I took action on. And then all of a sudden, there were all these events that were happening where the house that we were living in, the owners wanted to get back in. My son wanted to go to do IB, which he couldn't do in Byron. And there were all these events that were happening. And all of a sudden it happens. I wasn't constantly consciously busy with that, but it was something that was in the back of my mind, and it flipped through my thoughts every now and then. So yeah, it's a little bit both. You do have the conscious thought, but then you're not constantly consciously aware of what's happening.
It's a cool pathway. So that kind of opens it up then too. You know, when you make a huge mistake, like I know in the past, I've made some pretty big mistakes. I've made some big mistakes with coaches that I've invested in, and financially, you just go, oh God, I could have done so much with that $20,000, those sort of things. But then you go, I did that for a reason. What's the lesson in that? And yeah, I learned a lot from that, and it gives you it allows you to forgive, and it actually teaches you to forgive and not hold grudges as well. I don't know.
No, I think self-forgiveness it's a huge, huge thing. We can't underestimate self-forgiveness. And I guess, living life on our terms, I mean, it's such a broad, big, it means something potentially different to everyone, but yeah, I mean, self-forgiveness is huge. And how is it connected to living life on your terms? Because what Sabine said, maybe you learned from the past and you had to forgive something, and then that lesson, which is we're back to lessons, influences what living life on my terms looks like for me now. Because I know that in the last few years, like I have been an entrepreneur all my career, and freedom is a high value to me, and so is leverage. And entrepreneurship is very much about leverage and potentially freedom, depending on how you run your business and set things up and how successful it is. But over the last few years since COVID, I went and did those jobs, and I worked as an employee, always as a coach, because I was more committed to changing my career direction into coaching rather than being an entrepreneur. Like, that was more important to me at that time. But the thing is that I got to the point where I just know that it doesn't make me happy. Like, those sort of parameters that go with being an employee are not fitting for me, because I need more flexibility. I like to work. I work hard. I work a lot. Some would call me a workaholic, but there's still times when I don't work, like what Birgitta said before, which is that I don't have to be working if I'm choosing not to, or I want to do something else, so it's really interesting. So I think what I'm saying is that it's all about self-discovery, because living on our terms and what that means, and it's going to mean something different to everyone, but there's this self-discovery element that goes with that, and the mistakes we make and the self-forgiveness and all that.
Yeah, I'd love to say something about that as well. And I must say, I've just been back to resit my coaching course. And one of the big things within that whole week was about value. And I loved what you said, Sabine, when you were talking about mistakes and that you have to learn something about it. And then you can forgive. I think very often we first try to forgive, and then we forget to take the value out of what we've experienced, because that value is what we take with us. And then there is no how do you say that? When you get value out of something, there's nothing to forgive. It's like neutralizes the whole experience. And it's very powerful when we can do that. So when we can learn, when we can extract the value out of what our mistakes are, out of experiences that we have, out of trauma that we have, out of conflicts that we have, and see it from the perspective of, okay, what's the value that I can extract out of it? And it can be It can be anything. It can, like, for instance, Angela, the value that she got out of having the experience of being an employee is that she was like, I'm not aligned. I need to align to my values. And that is a value that's very important for me. So it's really interesting, and it's an interesting play field to work with and to look at value in everything that we do.
I love what you said about neutralizing. So if you look for the lessons and then forgive, there's actually nothing to forgive because you've got the lessons out of it that you needed.
Yeah.
So therefore you've
so there's no
neutralized it.
forgiving
I
it.
love that.
Yeah.
I've not heard that put like that before.
Yeah. Well, it is one of those things where a lot of times we're being told that we have to forgive. But forgiveness as such doesn't give us anything. You know, it's not valuable for one, and it's not valuable for somebody else. But when we sort of can sort of get the diamonds out of what we learned and have the value, there's nothing to forgive because, you know, it's neutral. It's
What do you
it's
think,
a very
Ange?
interesting concept.
I think, yeah, look, I think it is an interesting concept, and it's sort of a bit of a mind bender because when I think about forgiveness, I've got this sort of image of someone's done something to me that I didn't like, or someone's hurt me and I'm holding a grudge, you know, so it's sort of like putting the forgiveness into a different context around our own self-discovery and our own journey. But what's really interesting, so I do think it's a great thing to think about, and terminology often is the thing that enables us to have a different perspective around something, like the way it's expressed. And just before this discussion, I was coaching a young 23-year-old who's looking for his purpose in life, and he's not sure what it is, or he thinks he's not sure. This is so interesting. He thinks he's not sure, but so he doesn't know what he wants to study at uni, but he thinks he should be studying. But when he went to study and he did a course that required 4 hours a week of time, he felt so much resistance, and he's realized along the way that he loves self-study. And when I asked him about all these different books, you know, he's already read this, he's already read that, he's actually done a lot of self-discovery. And what came out was that he's about to book another trip overseas. So he's taking off again. And so there's a lot of judgment from his family. What are you doing? You're 23. You've just been on the trip. You've just come back. You're going again. You should have saved up all this money. I mean, you've saved up all this money. Now you're going off and spending it. And you should have your career and what you're going to study by now. And so he's like coming to me in the session with all this self-judgment. But what was really interesting and what we uncovered, that he's had a desire to write a book for the last 2 years. And when he was thinking of going overseas, because he's going to Nepal, he was imagining how crazy this was, but if he could just find a beautiful place in the Himalayas where he could have another go at writing his book. But he thought that was so crazy, and he hasn't told anybody. And so his real goal is to get that first draft done. And so really the session was all about getting rid of all these other expectations of what people feel you should and shouldn't be doing by now, and living life on your terms. So he had a lot of freedom out of that. And he was, you know, so I'm excited.
I'm excited for him too, and I don't even know him.
Yeah, no, true. I can see him sitting there.
Exactly, this really sweet 23-year-old. And so it's like, well, this is living life on your terms, and everyone's journey is not the same. And not everyone fits into the square. And so if we don't fit into the square, let's celebrate that.
Well, and it's also aligning with your values. And what he's basically come to the conclusion that one of his values is like traveling, but also doing things and creating things. So it's combining that and aligning that is really good.
And just because he didn't achieve it before, so he's feeling like a bit of a failure because he's tried to do it but it didn't really, like come out. And so it's really interesting about that forgiveness, the judgment, the expectations of what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing, and how we live our lives. And, it's a constant course correct for me to actually really honor my own journey. Like today I went to tapping with Jody, and it was all about that. It was just all about, that judging myself because I'm not at this level that, other people are at. And so I'm having to all about, honoring my own journey. And that.
So, Ange, are you living life on your terms then at the moment?
I feel I am. I feel that this.
What's it look like? What's it look like for you?
Yeah. So it looks like that I get my work is portable. I still get to run all my projects. I get to manage my own schedule. I get to make money, I get to, I guess, have that freedom and flexibility and still be able to make the impact I want to make. And that is more living life on my terms. And that's really the way I've lived most of my career. And that's when I'm happiest.
I totally agree. I think we're all quite similar like that, because mine is the same. And maybe that's the outcome or the path or the goal. I'm not quite sure what it is of of an entrepreneur, of a business person, that I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, and how I want. And if people want to judge me, they can judge me all they want, but it's not going to change what I'm doing or how I feel or where I'm going. And I think that's where sometimes we've got to accept that we may be feeling a bit guilty, but we probably shouldn't. But that's okay too then. If we're feeling a little bit guilty, okay, so we're feeling guilty right now, let's put it aside and move on and get back to living that life. So yeah, I think it's the same for me. Freedom is a huge, huge value of mine, and so is flexibility and independence. It's all those words that just mean so much to me, and I think we all deserve it. It's just we're here on this earth to deserve that. I'm such a huge believer in that, and there's so many people that don't get to do that. I don't think they think that it's within their reach, but it actually is. It's within everyone's reach. Everyone can do that. And everyone's path is different, but I think everyone has the capacity to do that. They've just got to want to do it enough. And I guess that's where that action comes into it.
And that's where those values come in, because it depends on what really your highest values are. I would rather sacrifice certainty. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was great being an employee. It was wonderful having a salary. It was wonderful not having to generate myself all the time. It was almost a little bit like a holiday. And, but now that I'm not doing that anymore, this really is my happy place. And so I guess I would rather trade the certainty for the freedom. Like it's that hierarchy.
I find it an interesting thing where you say being an employee is like being on a holiday. I've been an employee for a very long period of my life, and I can't say that it was always a holiday, to be honest. But I must say that I have been very lucky in the jobs that I had, because I had a lot of freedom.
Yes.
And for me, freedom is also freedom to create and to start things and be responsible for things and have the freedom to say, hey, I need this, or I want that, or this is my vision. And so for me, freedom is, because freedom is also one of my biggest, I think for most entrepreneurs, actually, it's one of my biggest values. But for me, freedom is not necessarily related to having my own business, but it's related to being able to make choices and to have choices, and not to be sort of put. I mean, if you put me in what straitjackets, I die.
Yeah.
I get if somebody starts to micromanage me, I get very resistant. If they let me go and I can do the things that I do and I make my mistakes and I learn from my mistakes, I'm happy. I love to interact. And that's one of the things that I love very much with having my own business, is that I am able to create what I want. But because I have had that when I was an employee as well, it's not like, well, it's not a holiday, but it's not like, oh, I really hate that and I really don't like that, or something else. But it is just about how much you can own what you do, and the choices you can make in how you mold your work and what you're doing. I think that's really important, and that's living life on your terms. Because I did love the fact that I had like lots of money when I was working for an because I did, and I could do anything, you know. But then on the other hand, I couldn't because I was restricted to the times they gave me time off, and now I have less money, but I can do what I want, you know. I can decide my own schedule, which is nice.
But you're working towards something huge, right? You know, and that's where, you know, so, and you used the word certainty before, and it's interesting because, see, in employment, I would never feel certainty. That's not a word that I would put together with being employed. So I think for me, there's more certainty in self-employment because everything is up to us. It's our responsibility. It's our choice where we're at. And yeah, I think certainty is, everyone wants certainty, of course, especially nowadays. You know, God, we've got so much talk about AI and hardly any certainty. I don't know. I think there's more certainty in being self-employed and being an entrepreneur, as long as you know where you're going, you've got the right guidance, and yeah, you've got that pathway.
Yeah, and money's coming in. But I guess what I mean in certainty is that, like, as an entrepreneur, it's like you don't know when your next sale is coming exactly. I mean, you know, you can work out your conversion rate, you know, like, you know, that my conversion rate is 25%. So I need to get, you know, this number of people to watch my masterclass. And then, you know, so obviously you can work out your conversion, and if you can stick, and once you tap into a system like a lead gen and conversion sales system and a good products and services, and, you know, so obviously there's a lot of certainty in entrepreneurship as well, which is sort of what you're saying. And the certainty about that is that you can control. See, it's like we get to control. If we do, there's like a cause and effect. Like if I do my bit, and generally that this is the truth in entrepreneurship as well, if we do the fundamentals, if we do our bit, if we do the things that we can control, and we leave no stone unturned, and we've got the right strategy, and we've got the right price point and the right products and services, then there is certainty in that. And that's sort of what you're saying, isn't it, Sabine?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas in employment, it's like you can lose your job. You know, there's so much interpersonal dynamics, which is very uncertain. You get a new boss that comes into the department and it's not a good leader, and basically the whole thing just falls apart, and everyone's interpersonal dynamics and mindset and sort of enthusiasm plummets. I know it was very eye-opening being an employee over the last few years, because I'd never done it. And I didn't.
I can imagine.
And I learned a hell of a lot. And it was life-changing and transformational. So I still got a lot out of it. But I guess the thing then comes down to, what's my preference? And my preference is not that.
Yeah. But I think one of the things as well, I mean, what came to mind is that when we are working as an employee, for instance, and we very often have all these external factors that we blame for the position we're in and the results that we have. When you're an entrepreneur, you can't do that. Well, you can, but I mean, the only person to blame is yourself. So it's from that perspective, it's quite a journey to travel through and to sort of transform and say, hey, listen, the results I have are my results, are my responsibility, and what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
So it's very reflective as well, I find.
Definitely. And it's the most amazing journey for self-discovery. I mean, how much you learn about yourself as an entrepreneur, because basically if I'm not getting the results, what is in my way? And, you know, what is in my way and what do I need to transform, which, you know, hence She Simply Impacts, and hence the collective of amazing, you know, coaches and facilitators in this group, because there's going to be something in our way. And so it's really amazing for self-discovery, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, true.
Yeah. I wouldn't change anything. I would not change anything about where I'm at and what I'm doing. Would you guys?
No.
Well, of course, make changes to progress, but not like the basics.
Yeah.
No. Well, and I think because there was one other thing that came to mind is what you find as well is that you have to take action. As you say, there's self-development, Angela, and there's lots of things that you learn about yourself, but in the end you have to dig yourself out of the hole, even with all the help around you. If you don't do the work, it will never happen.
Right, that's a good point. That's a very good point. If it's going to be, it's up to me.
Absolutely.
But accountability.
Yeah, those tired days, they're because of you.
Because of the choice you made the night before, or maybe you didn't sleep well, or you went out partying or something. But no, I know. But what I used to find when I was, you know, in that job is that, you know, I had to show up no matter what. You know, like I couldn't, let's say I was really exhausted, I couldn't like not go to work. You know, I had to push through, and it's like there's a whole self-care piece, you know, that if I don't look after myself, I'm just not going to cope, you know, or that's how it was for me. And so I sort of became this rigid robot. And
so what does a day look like for you now?
Me? Well, each day is quite different. But it depends on, you know, do I have coaching sessions? Do I have you know, a masterclass that I'm delivering? What do I need to output is, you know, what are my, I guess, deadlines that I've set, but mind you, I've set these deadlines. And then what are my non-negotiables? You know, what are my marketing fundamentals that just must happen as a routine?
So that's the business part of it. But what about your whole day? You know, like from start to finish? Because when you look at the whole day, you go, no, I wouldn't change anything.
You want to hear my day?
Yeah. What's your day look like? Start to finish. Go on, share.
Today I got up at 5. I meditated for an hour. Then I had about half an hour spare, and I decided I would go to tapping with Jody, which is one of the sessions in She Simply Impacts. And so I made myself some teas and everything and set myself up. And then I did the session, which went for an hour. And then I had a bit of a chit chat with the people that I'm staying with at the moment in Perth. And then I went to the gym. Then I came back from the gym. Then I had breakfast. And then I had my coaching session. And then I had this. And so now after this, I'm going to make some food for my daughter, because I'm still here sort of supporting her because she's just had the baby. And I'm going to then do my non-negotiables. So I've got a newsletter to send that goes out every fortnight. And so I must get that done. And then I've got I'm giving a talk tomorrow. And so I've got to just fill out the questionnaire so that the people can introduce me. I'm going to a networking event. And so they're the main things I have to get done the rest of today. Those main 3 things.
Sounds like a pretty good day. See, for me, the day starts off Like I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning and I meditated for a bit and I listened to some personal development, which is, for me, it's either that, the personal development side, or it's going to boot camp and exercising. So I generally go to boot camp 4 or 5 days a week, or at 4, 4, 3, whatever the balance ends up being. I don't really beat myself up about which way it goes. And then I just, I get into the day a little bit slowly. Sometimes I go and have coffee with friends and come back at 9:30, and then I get into the day. Might do a few interviews, might do, a few coaching sessions, get into the day. But you know what? If I need to do the washing or if I need to do something in between, that's okay too. It might be a distraction for, 20 minutes or something here or there, but that's okay too. And there's so much conversation about, when you're working at home, you're working on your own, you get distracted by these things, and that's not okay, but it actually is okay because it's still a break for your mind. So yeah, so then I just kind of finish whenever I want and get on to dinner and toddle about. I don't even know what I bought myself a puzzle book, like a physical puzzle book. And so I do some puzzles and then I journal and then I'm off to sleep. Like it might be 9 o'clock, it might be 11 o'clock, whatever. I'm, I don't get hung up on times, or it's just kind of nice to be able to do what you want to do. How about you, Birgitta? What's your day look like?
Well, my day starts a bit later. That's one thing, because you are up so early. I mean, I have never gotten my head around that. 4 o'clock is middle of the night. 5 o'clock is still too early, although it gets light now. But so I wake up usually around 7 o'clock. And this morning I've done some meditation. I am just getting into that, so I haven't done it. I'm still not a regular, but I do like that. And I do a special kind of meditation that sets me up for the day. Then I have a coffee, then I go for a walk with dog and I listen to either a book or something else, or I'm just walking around and let my mind go free to see what happens. And then I go into my day and it depends a little bit on what I have on my schedule. So it can be either some creative work that I have to do or some non-creative work that has to be implemented. What I tend to do to get my focus, and I do agree with you, Sabine, that having these distractions in like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I always say I'm a entrepreneur. So that is part of what I do. But I like to, when I really have to be focused, I put an alarm and I put it for 15 minutes because I know that when I do that I don't have to worry about the time that I have to spend, but I can really, really get into what I'm doing. And then when the alarm goes off, I'm like, shit, the alarm goes off. And I jump up and then do something strange. And then I put the alarm on again and I go on. So it's really setting myself up to get things done in my day. And then I usually don't have breakfast. I have breakfast at somewhere between 12 and 1. So I take my time to make my shake or whatever I'm eating, look around, wander a bit around, sometimes have a swim because it's getting nice now. Although now I'm looking outside and it's actually very dark, so I wouldn't do it today, but going for a swim is nice. And then I just go back to work, have coaching sessions, meetings, whatever I have on my calendar. And then around 5 o'clock, I go and walk the dog again, see some other people. My dog is always very, very happy when I take him out and he is allowed to sniff all the other dogs. And then I basically go make dinner and then I relax and either I read a book or I watch a movie or have a book club or whatever is happening on my evening. And I do not go to bed very early. So usually it's 11:30 before I go to bed and sometimes later. So that's why I don't get up that early.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
I like the fact that I like the fact that I can plug in whatever I want to plug in during the day.
And do you know, a lot of people would say that's not possible for me. I have to work for other people because I don't have the knowledge or the experience or whatever to run my own business. I think that's absolute rubbish. I think everyone has experience. Everyone has life experience. Everyone has experiences. and everyone has something they can talk about or do or teach others. You've just got to work out what it is. I think it's actually possible for everyone. And I think it's important for, and this is why I actually like these conversations, is because I think it's important for people to realize that they can do more, and that they can, you know, do what it is that they want to do and live their life on their own terms, especially moving forward into the future when jobs are probably going to be even more unstable as to whether you keep your job or whether you're going to be replaced by AI or whatever it might happen to be. You know, I think I just wish that people would go, yeah, I've got this confidence in myself. I can do it. I've got experiences. I've got knowledge, and I can do something. There's so many possibilities.
Yeah, I do want to say something about that, because I lived the first part of my life in Europe, in the Netherlands. One of the things that I found very difficult, because I knew from quite early on that I wanted to do something for myself. But the creativity to come up with something that I could do, I found that very hard. And when I came over in Australia, all of a sudden, it was as if the doors were opening, because everybody was doing that. So I think it's a cultural thing as well that sometimes holds us back, and that makes us less creative than we could be. And because one of the things that I remember being in the Netherlands was like, okay, but yeah, I want to do something, but what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I sell? What can I, what can I do? And it is that limiting belief where you're in at that point in time, and that cultural struggle where everybody is like an employee, because here is like 80% of businesses are small. In the Netherlands, it's the other way around. So 80% of the businesses are larger businesses. So 80% of people are employees. So it's a different kind of culture. So it's harder to break away from that, I think, unless you're like really entrepreneurial. And here you just have to be creative. And
and the government
find your passion.
And the government supports you in Australia. Like there's that program, there's that assistance program, which I used to mentor for last year, which is, the government funded coaching and mentoring, the federally funded government program. And so maybe that is the case. But Sabine, you and I were talking about this recently, about the AI thing, and how there's so much uncertainty now with jobs, because there's a book I read called, I've forgotten the name of it, but I'll put it in the notes. It's by one of the founders of AI. His company, DeepMind, got bought out by Google. He said in that book that usually when there's big shifts like this that we're going through in history, that new jobs are created. But in that book, he actually said that he doesn't think the jobs are going to be, it's not going to be the same as the previous shifts we've had. And so this makes it really compelling in order to really start exploring this stuff, because maybe the employment thing isn't really that stable as we think it is and certain. And then if you don't build your personal brand, which is what Sabina and I were talking about as well, which is what I help people do, you've got nothing. Like we've got to start transitioning ourselves and becoming a lot more flexible around how we can live and how we can make money and how we can develop skills that we're protected.
Yeah, but to be very honest, I mean, I know I've been around the block a couple of times because I worked in IT, and IT was the big disruptor in the last century. And before that, like my parents, they grew up with the idea that once you worked for someone, that was a job for life. That was what you were aiming for. With IT, that was when the first computers came and everything, and the first applications and everything, that started to shift, and it was not as certain anymore that you had that certainty. And so there was more movement, not as much yet, But I think that every time that something big happens in technology, especially in technology, we all start to be very, 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 very scared. I've got a slightly different approach, because I know that even though it looks for somebody who doesn't know anything about it, that it's going to take it over, we still need our rational minds. We still need to be critical. We still need to have our critical thinking to ensure that what's being spit out is actually accurate, because it's not. I mean, it's rubbish in, rubbish out. So it's everything that we put in, and it's a learning machine. But if we teach it wrong, then the things that come out are wrong. So we do need people that are able to understand that it's a tool, first of all, that it can help us to get to where we want to go faster. But it's not going to replace us, because we still need to be critical to make sure that what comes out is actually reflecting of that. And it reminds me of the first, the first software that was put in place, and it was like the Holy Grail. And now everything is becoming easier, and we have all the data, and we don't need this anymore, we don't need that anymore. Well, look at some of the companies that just went under because they relied too much on that. So I think we just have to make sure that we are being critical and that we keep thinking.
And I think that's where branding comes into it. And branding is not just the beginning of a business anymore. I think branding is expanding in the way that, branding is how you look and how you appear, but it's also your knowledge, that feeds into the internet about who you are. And it may be in the background, but it's there to be found, and it's there to feed into AI, and it's there. So I think branding is almost like this expanding word, or this expanding thing, that encompasses a lot more than what we used to think it was, which was colors and fonts and websites, and then it went to that plus purpose and values and those sort of things. But I think now it's also, how do you actually appear, and how do you let the world know that you are a person, and that you are knowledgeable, and that you do have experience, and that you are capable of still being behind the person behind your business.
And
and I think it's more individualized. Sorry.
Capable of solving a problem and articulating what that problem is. No, definitely. And I think that book, by the way, is called The Coming Wave. It is a great book. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Birgitta, and I think that AI is going to free. I mean, I feel freed and liberated by what I use, and I'm only on the very tip of the iceberg about, learning how to apply it all in business. But I still think that, living life on your terms and defining what that is, and taking time out to actually, what Sabine said, to think about what could you offer, what could you do if you push came to shove and you had to do it, or you had to find another way to make a living. What would it be? Like, start making that a conversation with yourself and documenting that, and sharing that with your inner circle.
Yeah, it's like the new resume, actually.
The digital footprint is the resume. Absolutely. Amazing.
Kind of going off track here, aren't we?
A little bit.
On your terms has become a conversation about AI, but
Absolutely.
it's all interrelated.
I wanted to say, I mean, if you think about it, living life on your terms means also that you need to know what your value is, so that you can. So it is related in a lot of ways.
And that's a journey in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we're here at She Simply Impacts, to facilitate and to support you with, and, us included, everyone involved. What a fun discussion.
It was very cool.
Right.
Hey, Ange, before we finish this discussion, if anyone is listening to this and they're not watching it, we've all got roughly the same colours on. We've all got glasses on. It's quite bizarre. We're sitting here on Zoom, and we're all looking so similar in a lot of ways, yet it was completely unintentional. And our conversation is actually very similar in a lot of ways when we're talking about living life on your terms. It's quite bizarre how this has happened. I think the only difference really is that Angela's got really short hair, Birgitta's got shoulder length hair almost, and mine's long. Quite bizarre. But Ange, this has been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Fun. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely fun.
Yeah, thanks so much. And take care. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Take care and bye for now.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.